So what we're going to look at is what we call socioscientific inquiry-based learning, as it might be in the national curriculum. And it's called SIBL for short, but don't worry about that at all. But what we're looking at is any inquiry, if you're looking to answer questions about things, and hopefully we'll see this as you go along to find out about things, that it will involve things that are broader than what we call the substantive science. So it might involve people in their personal lives, or it might be involve thinking about the environment or some issues like that, and what action, how you might act upon those things. So it's really trying to find answers to questions that interest you. So what we want to do is, if you're doing inquiry, for instance, if you're doing inquiry in schools, it's very unlikely that you're going to have a class where the kids are going to come in and say, oh, we really want to inquire about this today, right? We really want to do that. In other words, the teacher has to have a role in kind of generating interest, which taps into things that of what the children genuinely are interested in. And in fact, once students do start to think in this way, they do start to do it much more naturally and much more spontaneously.
Oh my god, this oh my god, like, the Kinder Surprise is a toy in it, which is plastic, which comes from oil.
I know, but we're thinking about the outside.
Ah,
Think of the wrapper first, yeah. Not the toy.
I'm thinking about the chocolate.
It's got more milk in it and less cocoa in the chocolate. We've learned that.
Ah, okay.
I'm not sure that's helpful.
So you think of something that can connect the rock, the egg,
And the picture.
Yeah. So like the extraction of rocks from the environment to make, not necessarily Kinder eggs, but like human.
If we think of the paper that we had to read about aluminium, I wonder if this is aluminium.
It's to do with reusing resources, maybe. Is it recyclable?
It is recyclable.
Could this be aluminium ore? What's aluminium ore like?
So what you're trying to do is you have these three objects, trying to fit together a sort of narrative or a story which linked the three objects, thinking of the outer layer, the wrapper of the Kinder egg, the rock and the picture. And then you ask hopefully some questions which you need to make sense of the story, to put it together. And then you may have categorized those questions into different types, maybe questions about knowledge, maybe questions about people, that type of thing. So anybody want to suggest what the story might be? What might be the links in the story? What might it be?
So we had a few questions asking about the rocks. Yeah. So kind of what are the rocks? Is it some sort of ore? And I guess kind of linking on to what Stuart was just saying, kind of also kind of how would that be extracted? That maybe kind of might link to kind of what's happening in the picture. And then we also went through and sort of about kind of the different kind of questions we had. So kind of we started writing kind of what, where, when, why, and kind of how. Kind of various things to do with that.
So as a teacher, what I might be doing is taking some of those questions and saying, let's follow them through a little bit more to try and make more sense of the story. Okay?
I think what is the significance? So if we follow the story that we were considering, which was using resources to make things and the damage and the impact then on the kind of environment, what is the significance? We've got a very small amount of foil surrounding a Kinder egg, and then if this is from kind of gathering the foil, that's an awful lot of destruction for quite a little thing.
Right. So when we're some of the questions we might want to think about when we're looking at socio-scientific issue-based inquiry, when we're looking at things which go beyond the science but involve society, are questions like who gains and who loses, and who is this technology for? So we've already had a sense that there is an impact on the environment, right? There is an impact on the environment. So there's a sense of, well, we've got this wrapper for the Kinder egg. So we've got the Kinder egg, which is a nice chocolate present to eat, but actually there's also a relationship between that and environmental damage. So who is the technology for when we're manufacturing aluminium, for example? And then comes the question of who gains and who loses, because almost any action we take in society, there are winners and there are losers. Okay? There are people who gain, who make profit from that, and there are people who might lose out from that. And I defy you almost to think of a technology where that doesn't happen, okay? Where that doesn't happen in that way. And for students, what are they interested in and what does it matter to them? So are there things the students are raising which say, yeah, I'd be really interested in following that up, or that is something where I genuinely want to find an answer to that question. So how can we support students really, and this is something you'll start to do for yourself in a moment, in asking questions and pursuing inquiries which matter to them. And the sort of things that students notice are the things which matter. So the fact that you're noticing a relationship between environment and the kinder egg suggests that that is something, at least in some way, that matters to you, okay? Or that the relationship between the kinder egg and the rock is something that matters. The very fact that you've identified that might mean that it matters.
Anything else in there that's interesting? But we also want you to be curious from all sorts of different perspectives about what's in that mystery box. Now, one of the things we asked you to do as well to get ready for the session was to go into your SE1 school and have a conversation with your mentor or perhaps another science teacher about the kinds of inquiry that are actually going on in school this term or perhaps a little bit later in the year. Could you share some of the findings from those conversations in the next few minutes? Has anybody used any, socio-scientific issues as a stimulus as part of that? A little bit like we've started to explore now with the aluminium story. And a little bit further down, of course, was how do they feel about the openness or the structure or the guided approach to inquiry that might be needed to make inquiries work in school? All right, so can you have a conversation with your partners?
All right, what did you think? Am I starting? No, Adam, I go first. You go first. So when I asked my mentor, she said that an inquiry-based lesson is having a scenario or a question, and then the lesson is based around that kind of question for them. And a lot of it comes down to how the teacher structures it. There's a lot of dependence on that.
So my schools got a big thing about learning identities. So they want to be kind of collaborative, resilient, I can remember all the terms, reflective and active learners.
Yeah.
So I think, and they basically want to become kind of autonomous learners. I think that links into quite a lot of the kind of things which they would call inquiry to the basic learning. So actually they want them to get on and be able to kind of find things out for themselves. But I think that's mainly done through kind of experiments, practical experiments, where it is still quite led.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, they often do it for the sake of being practical, not really planning to do some inquiry stuff. And then if you try to do something more inquiry-based, I think they often find it's not, well, it's not usually worth the payoff, so actually it takes a lot longer, and they don't necessarily find out anything more than you can just tell them the fact in kind of a few minutes.
Yeah. I guess the kind of potential problem doing it with practicals is that, like, if it doesn't work, then like, practicals don't always work out the way you want them to.
None of my practicals have worked out. None of them. I had one where I got the complete opposite set of results than I anticipated. So we had to do an entire lesson questioning what went wrong.
We're very interested in gathering this sort of local knowledge of what's going on in your schools with regard to inquiry. So I can hear lots of examples of the classic practical inquiry where some of the focus becomes on certain aspects of it.
But what we'll move to is looking now more at socioscientific inquiry-based learning. So again, we should start from a question which matters to students, which students might feel strongly about, but they have a science element and a sort of socio-political element. They have an element that matters to society. It's traditional from a sort of science inquiry, which Lucy was talking about just then, where you're actually trying to think relationships between different entities in science, because you're actually looking to a social issue or a personal issue. And that might involve collecting data through experiments, but it might involve doing surveys. It might involve modelling. It might involve having discussions. So it might involve collecting data in a way that's not traditionally associated with science lessons. And it could be that an interdisciplinary thing carried out maybe with history teachers, with citizenship teachers and so on. And the solution to that is something that makes a difference, where the young people think, I actually not only know more about that subject, but in some way I feel I can now do something about it personally or socially. Right? I can knowing what I know, I can now act in a different way and think about the kind of products I have and how I might want to act on it. So that's the basis of Sybil. And here are some of the sort of questions last year that arose from groups. So there's one on smoking, and we'll come to that. Why do teenagers smoke? You know, if we know it's bad for you, why do we do it? Should there be a fat tax on food? Should we, you know, have food which is fatty? Should we tax it more? Why do only 3 students at my school cycle to school? Why do only 3 use bikes? Is there any way we can change that situation? How can the number of plastic bottles being used in my school be reduced? And how can we become more healthy? Well, that's quite a broad question, but would need narrowing down somewhat at first. So let's go. So this was one topic which was looked at last year, quite a common thing in school, smokers' corner, girls in particular going off, young girls, teenage girls going off and having a quiet smoke. So what we want to do is 2 things. First of all, one thing, an inquiry for you to think about. Have we got the sheets, Ruth, on? So what we want to think about first is there's 2, as a group, we'll give you first an inquiry which you might want to find. How would you go about finding answers to this? And what is the science involved? And how might you go about addressing the problem? And this is for you to think about as yourselves. Don't worry about the pupils. And then when you've thought that through, on the other side is the issue about vaping. You know, vaping has become very common now. And think about, well, if you were setting this as a task for Key Stage 3 students, how might you set it up? How might you ensure appropriate science is used? And how might you set it up as an inquiry? Is that okay?
We're wondering, what do you know about vaping? And if you were going to extend what Maria did last year into perhaps a bit more of a contemporary feel for it, how would you go about that? What do you need to know to furnish and set up that kind of inquiry into something a little bit new? So as Ralph was saying, and some of you've slipped over to the back there, you've got a picture on the back of your sheet there of somebody vaping. What goes on when that happens? Is it and how well does it help somebody give up? What's the idea behind that sort of substitute technique, if you like? The article about the boy at school is actually on the back, a couple of backboards. You might like to have a look at it more closely later, or I might try and put it up on the screen if we've got time. But could you sort of take that inquiry a little bit further? What would you need to do? Now, if you've got your mobile devices with you, as you say today, perhaps you might even have to start by looking up what vaping actually is. So has everybody got something with them? If you haven't got anything with you, we have got a couple of laptops in reserve over there. So do you want to do a little bit of research to take you into the second stage of the inquiry, and still thinking about how could this be a socio-scientific inquiry?
I think the school will probably be right, because if you was using the device in school and in school settings, it could be disruptive to other members of the class. It could encourage other kids to start taking it up, and vaping does involve taking in nicotine. I don't think they were right to take it away completely. I think there should have been maybe a set of rules in place, like you can only use it at certain times in certain places, and definitely not in the classrooms. 10 facts that everyone gets wrong about vaping.
I just didn't know. I think it's a good idea to get people away from cigarettes. Like, it is healthier. Like, it's still not as good as not smoking at all.
I don't know, because I think a lot of us, we don't have the information or data yet on it.
That's true.
That's the new thing. And you do also have to be 18 to buy them. So
Yeah.
there's a kind of question about you shouldn't have it anyway. That doesn't necessarily.
Okay, so they were actually like invented in 1963, but it was only in 2003 when it got popular because it had a higher nicotine hit. So it's still.
But I think also one of the problems is it's not regulated so much. So kind of, World Health Organization says there's about 500 e-cigarette brands out there, and very few have been analysed as to what they're actually kind of smoking. Whereas cigarettes is really quite strict, I think. At least you know the bad stuff you're taking in. Whereas there could be like much longer information.
There's so much more data on smoking as well.
It's the same with like legal highs and stuff like that. As in, I think generally people would rather you took illegal drugs than the legal ones because we know the effects of them. Whereas these legal ones, we don't really know the effects of them. We've got years to study them.
No, exactly.
I think if I were going to do this with a class, it might be quite interesting to get a bunch of pictures of the different newspaper stories. So some newspapers have gone, oh no, this is really bad for you, some have gone, it's really good. And then the question in the middle would be, your best friend / little brother or sister has just started vaping. How do you feel about this? Are you worried? Why? Because then they're going to want to go and be like, oh, what do I need to know? Hopefully.
Yeah, good. So there's an emotive aspect to it as well, isn't there? Yes.